Hello and welcome to a CX Moment. I'm Sarah Reed from Zendesk, and we are about to talk about extreme obstacle races and agent engagement and customer service and messaging, all things and more that I believe are important to Spartan Race and for the most part to you as well. A CX Moment is all about you, so please go ahead and drop your questions into the chat. And if you like what we're chatting about, share it on social using hashtag CX Moment. Today, we are joined by Aja Varney, Director of Global Customer Engagement at Spartan Race. And while most of us are more than ready to move past the post-pandemic life, what Spartan Race did during the pandemic is so noteworthy and so indicative to their success now, including a focus on creating an emotional connection with their customers, a flexible agent team, and a shift into conversational messaging. They did all of that. And so I want to talk about it because I think it is very cool. But before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. You're going to see a poll pop up on the right-hand side of your screen right now. And we'd like to know, do you differentiate between chat and messaging? Some people think it's the same. Some people think it's different. And we'd love to hear what you have to say. So do you differentiate between chat and messaging? All right, while those responses are coming in, let's go ahead and bring Aja up because we have some things to talk about. Hey, Aja.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Happy to be here and talk customer experience, my favorite topic.
Well, it is one of mine as well. And you and I have had lots of these conversations over the years. So I'm excited to do it here as well. So, but pretend I've never talked to you before. I know nothing about Spartan Race. How do you describe who your customers are?
Oh man, you guys know who you are. You're the crazy people that enjoy running up a mountain, getting muddy, climbing over walls, and generally having an adventure outside of your daily norm. So that might be trail racing, that might be our traditional obstacle racing, that might be trying your first Tough Mudder even. It can be any kind of adventure you want to have. There's something for you under our sort of umbrella of products. So I think everybody on this call probably knows who they are if they're interested in this crazy kind of gritty lifestyle, I think.
So there's people are pretty fanatical about being a part of the Spartan Race family. Am I correct?
Absolutely. We have some of the most awesome, most loyal, and rabid fans out there. I think the biggest differentiator really for our brand is those rabid customers. And, it just takes one rabid customer and then they rope in all of their friends. And next thing we know, there's a team of 100 people climbing over that wall together. So I think, that we couldn't do it without those rabid fans. And they certainly are our bedrock of our brand.
So as you talked about, your product is primarily in-person events, or at least it was. So you've added on a few extra things over the course of the past 2 years. But it's really about gathering people together all around the world in these, at these races. And you have, as you mentioned, an incredible community. You have incredible brand recognition. And there's also just a big personality around Spartan Race. So how did you take all of those things and stay connected with your customers during the pandemic?
It was hard. Definitely was a huge shift for us because from a primarily live events company, we're used to putting on a big event on a weekend, having thousands of people get muddy, get together, help each other out in person. And we couldn't do that all of a sudden, like literally from one week to another. Suddenly it was wipe the schedule clean. You can't see anyone in person. So suddenly we had to all kind of stop and say, now what? How do we connect with our customers still? How do we give them what they need during the pandemic to keep them engaged with us as a brand and things like that? And it forced a lot of hard conversations and difficult kind of shifts in mindset. But at the same time, I think it was really huge for us because it made us really focus on what we needed and what our customer needed. So for us, it was a little bit more focused on a virtual kind of world for our customers. So we did some virtual events during the pandemic. We focused a lot on creating a logged in account for the customer where they could access training plans and they could connect more with their community in a virtual way, and really kind of supporting the customer through that pandemic. So if you've only got you can't go to the gym, what do you have? What can you get access to in your living room? How can you still train so that when we can come back to events, you're ready to rumble? And I think it was a real shift in thinking because, if we're expecting people to be at the gym or be out on the course with us and suddenly they couldn't. So how did we tackle that? And I think that virtual focus on technology and focusing on that more holistic customer journey, meeting them where they were, even if that was on their couch for the pandemic, that was a really big shift for us.
Well, as someone who puts on events for a living, I get exactly everything you're talking about. So, except for that whole mud thing, we don't have a lot of mud at our events. Although maybe that's something we should now incorporate post-pandemic. It might, mix things up a bit. But all right, so you talked about some of those initiatives and the fact that most, if not all of those, are now still in effect. Like you recognize that, wow, even though people are now getting out back into the world, having an online training program probably was something you should have been doing all this time, right? It's another way of creating loyalty and connection. But now I want to talk about, you talked about some of those other pivotal changes. What did you have to do from a technology perspective that really helped your customers stay connected to you that you've now been able to keep in this new chapter?
Yeah, I think, there was a couple really key things. I mean, the first thing was we had this, I guess, time and space, given the fact we couldn't put on live events, we had the time and space to actually look at the technology that we had and how to do it better. So we actually launched a Spartan training app during this pandemic, and it had been on the roadmap for years, and there was ideas and all this kind of stuff, and it kind of forced the function. And I won't say the first iteration was perfect, but we got it out the door, and now we've spent some time refining it and making it a really, worthy product. But I think a lot of it was just assessing the status quo. Like we had the time now with our teams not putting on events to look hard at what we were doing. And in many cases, and I think probably like many of us on this, conversation, we're operating on a very lean team, more so than we ever have. So how could we make the technology that we had work for us in the best way possible? So, is this technology serving us? Do we need something different? And kind of looking at all the options, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, but it's kind of how we arrived at, transitioning to messaging from live chat and things like that. So I think for us, it was a kind of deep breath and a pause to look at what are we doing? Is it useful to the customer? Is it useful to us as a business? And should we do something different?
Before we get into messaging, you just touched on something that I know people watching are probably feeling as well. We all had this big surge during the pandemic, a change, right? It's like teams all went home if they weren't already home. We had to get laptops out to people who might not have been equipped with all their technology. We had to make sure that they had the right internet connections. We had to do all these things. We also had to change all of our processes, our policies to actually support all of our now at home and all of our customers at home because they were doing something different. So all this change is happening and we're in this big surge of new adoption and new stuff. And then we kind of get used to it. We're 2 years into it. And now we look around and we go, whoa, like, do I have the right team in place? Are these processes still serving me? Are they now right for my audience? Because my audience might have changed a little bit. So how has your customer base changed over the past 2 years? And how are you adapting, I should say, to that?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting, it's probably been the most interesting 2 years of my professional career. Things have
I hope
changed.
it's the most interesting for all of
Interesting, we're calling it. I think previously our customers, we were a bustling live events business. People were ready to jump out on the course. They had their routines. They were training for things. They were ready to go. the pandemic sort of stopped that for everyone, and not just for us as a company, but for all the customers. Most of our customers who are global at this point, to varying degrees of impact from the pandemic, didn't have access to gyms for a month or a year, or couldn't leave their house. We've had team in various parts of the world who literally could not leave their house, due to laws and restrictions, like not anything compared to what we saw here in the US. So, I think we had to stop and take a look at what that customer was experiencing. And for us, that customer now, we're starting to put on live events again. We've got a robust schedule this year and things like that. But that customer isn't quite in the place they were. They're not quite ready to jump off the couch and get back into a hardcore event. They're just not. It's been kind of a crazy 2 years, and no one's feeling as confident in their physical fitness in a lot of cases, or they're not feeling as connected to each other and a team that they might have brought to an event or things like that. So we really had to kind of reassess how we're talking to our customer and what they needed. So what we found is that our customers, we need to kind of take it back to basics a little bit and say, okay, you've been on the couch for 2 years. Check out our training program. Let's get you 3 months before your race and figure out how we get you there, or things like that. How do we connect you with other people that are training, so you have that community support and sort of incentive to leave the house again? Because I think, that's another big thing. Not everyone's feeling safe yet. Like, not everyone's quite in that place to go to a 5,000 person event. And I think, we have to, as a business, acknowledge that and offer some different options. So, we've got home programs, we've got live events if you're ready for it. We've got ways to train virtually with your teams, all kinds of things, so that no matter where you are as a customer right now, because you are different than you were 2 years ago, we've got something for you.
Well, one of the questions that just came in was, what were some of those big changes that you noticed with your customers, which I think you addressed beautifully. But what were also some of those changes that you saw with your team that you had to address as a leader?
Yeah, so I think we were very lucky in one way. We have been a fully remote customer experience team for the last 10 years. So working remotely wasn't a shift for us, but certainly we were working on an extra lean team, which I know many of us were. So there was more work for each person. And I think, all of our teams had the external stress of the pandemic and whatever was going on with their families and the world and the community. But then also, customers were a little bit more feisty than usual, we'll say.
That's very polite of you.
Customer service, but I think it was a little bit more, customers required a little bit more hand holding, a little bit more engagement. And we had to try and find ways to, how do we support those customers, give them the answers that they need without burning out our agents who are overwhelmed with life in general at the moment? How do we maybe use technology to make it a little bit easier for all parties involved? And
right.
It's been a difficult time for sure.
Well, so let's talk about technology and let's talk about channels. You made mention at the beginning that you had this pretty monumental shift from chat to messaging. And when we asked that question, most people who are watching today don't actually think of those two things as different. So how are they different in your mind? And how did you sell it as different to your leaders at Spartan Race?
Yes, I think it definitely took a little bit of, as a business that has used a very traditional live chat model for many years, very successfully, we had to look at other options. We simply didn't have the staff that could sit on a live chat on those designated hours, waiting for chats to come in. And we just didn't have enough people to support the volume that would come in. So we had to look for other options. A live channel or an almost live channel is very important to our customers. They love that interaction. So we were trying to find a way to preserve that ability to interact with us, but maybe not be locked into that very rigid live chat schedule, because live chat is either on or it's off. And if it's on, you better be ready to staff it, which is sometimes the challenge if you're operating on a very lean team. So for us, the difference with messaging was that because it's asynchronous, always on, wherever people are. It's going to meet the customer wherever they are on our website or our channels. It allowed us to staff as much as we could. And if that message is coming in and we've got a person that is able to address it in a live scenario, great. If we don't, they can still get that message to us and someone will answer it as fast as possible. So it was kind of an interesting hybrid maybe between email and chat. It's like a little bit of both. And it just, for us, the biggest change was the ability to have more flexible staffing. So I didn't have to sit somebody on live chat and say, you're here for the next 4 hours, and this is what you have to focus on. It allowed us to have a little bit more flexibility and meet the messages wherever they were.
Do you utilize a bot when you don't have agents available?
We do. So we've spent a lot of time, and it's still work in progress, I will say. It's still something we're refining because it is relatively new to us, but how to keep the brand personality, how to deliver the information that the customers really need. We do have some pretty, I would say, top 3 or 4 repetitive sort of questions that are easy for us to self-service through a bot for a customer. But, also making sure that we give them the option to go to that human if that is what people prefer. Because I think, like all of us that have kind of struggled to implement, bots and things like that into our strategies, the human option is still very important to some customers. So we're trying to preserve that and really make sure our agents are, utilized for those interactions that really need them, while using the more efficient bot for the sort of simpler answers where we can.
Knowing what I know about Spartan Race, I would anticipate that naming the bot was quite the fun experience internally and probably a little heated.
He's still under debate. Spartan bot is still under debate. We haven't quite landed on. There's a lot, as you rightly assess. There's a lot of personality with our brand, so we haven't quite refined that experience yet. But the good thing is we can just keep refining it, and I like to look at these things as never done. So, we've got a improved experience over 2 years ago, and now we're, every month, how can we make it a little bit better and a little bit better for our customers?
And that's such a great best practice right there, that all of our channels, no matter which ones we implement and we have that are right for our customers, right for us, they all require iteration. And there's never a set it and forget it, as the old infomercials used to say. It is, it's constant iteration. And if that's not a reason to keep going back to your self-service just to find out what the bot ultimately gets named, I don't know what is. Maria has a question in regards to channels, and she'd like your opinion on what do you think is the better user experience right now in the world as we know it, chat messaging or email support?
For Spartan, the answer is definitely chat messaging. I think my own experience as a customer, I don't think all organizations have quite gotten chat messaging down. What I find when I hit a lot of chat messaging is that people, you have a tier 1 agent, let's say, that's not empowered to help you in any way. They're following a script and they have 2 answers for you, and then you get redirected to email anyway. This drives me nuts. If this is you on this call, reevaluate your process. But I think chat has the potential. People love to interact in person, and the more interactions you have with your customer, you get so much, I'll call it accidental feedback. They're telling you about your product. They're telling you where they need help. They're telling you where they need more information. And if your agents are properly trained and things like that, you can really get so much out of that interaction. I think email is how we've always done it, and I think it's a great standby and good for a lot of issues. But I think, to me, live chat is the up and comer, and now more so even messaging to my preference.
I totally agree with you. I see messaging absolutely as the future. It's certainly the direction that Zendesk is headed. But to your point, had a very delayed flight on my favorite airline. So it pains me so much that they pushed me to messaging, which I got really excited about. And then it was an absolute fail. And I know it's really, really new for them and they're trying so hard. But ultimately I ended up on the phone with an agent, and I was like, you could have just saved me that pain. But I'm going to give it another whirl. I know they're going to get it. It's just there's some we're all trying. All
I
right,
think
so
sometimes knowing your customer, right, and their use case. If you're,
yeah,
like you had a flight, you need an answer right then. Like, so putting you to an asynchronous channel or to an email or something doesn't work. But, for a business like ours, your event registration, it's probably not like something we need to deal with in that absolute second. So we might have a little bit more leeway. So I think, for
yes.
anybody, it's looking at your use case and saying, are these urgent issues that I absolutely need to address in a minute or two? Or is this something that can be done on an asynchronous channel? Because I think any channel can be awesome depending on how you execute it.
Love that advice. All right, let's talk about maybe things that aren't so awesome. Allison has this question, which I know a lot of people were experiencing during the pandemic and still experiencing customer service every single day. And that is, how do you combat negativity? You certainly had to do refunds, deferrals, all these things that you had to do during the pandemic with races that were canceled or postponed. And then if you don't get to them right away, what do people do? They push it out on social media. What was your approach? Or what is your approach?
I'm so glad to hear that everyone was in this boat with us. It was definitely a very rough time. We were in a particularly difficult situation because although we had to cancel and postpone every event on the schedule, in 90% of cases, we literally as a business could not give people a refund. We could not give them their money back. The only option we had was to say, thank you so much. We're going to get you to another race as soon as we can have them. As you can all imagine, that went over like a lead balloon. It was not a great experience for our customer support team, but it was what we had to do as a business. There was no other option. So I think there's a couple of strategies we employed to ultimately get to the other side of that. We were very transparent with our customers. Our CEO and founder went on social media and did a live broadcast and explained why we couldn't give refunds. And basically it was, if you want to ever see races again, we can't give you these refunds now. And really just tried to be transparent in all our communications. If we did have to cancel a race, we explained as many options as we could think of to make people still have value from their ticket. We're going to get you 2022 or 2023 if you need to, or whatever it might be. Provided all the options we can, did the best we could. And I think the biggest thing was transparency. I think if your customer knows what you're dealing with, people are humans. If you talk to them like a human instead of just a robot, sorry, no refunds, doesn't go over very well. But if you say like, hey, we're really trying, unfortunately, to keep the business going through this difficult time. We can't, but here's what we can do, offering as many alternatives as you can. That was helpful for us. And ultimately, we kind of had to ride it out a little bit because as we all know, we're never going to make 100% of the people happy. So, we did our best to get to as many people as possible and offer good solutions. But at the end of the day, we had to really just give as many tools to our social media teams and our customer service teams to address those questions head on when they came so that they didn't just sort of fester in our communities. Everyone knew exactly our position, what we were doing, what we could offer. And yeah, it was a little grumbly, particularly in the early part of the pandemic. My poor team definitely got a onslaught of difficult questions and difficult conversations. But I think, then it's our job as managers to really support the teams as much as possible. And, we had to do a lot of talking and training with the team that, the customers aren't yelling at you. They're not yelling at you, Sarah, or me, Aja. They're yelling at the situation and the external forces, and maybe they got laid off during the pandemic and all this other stuff. So, at some point you have to kind of let it breathe through you and do the best you can, offer the options you can. But at the end of the day, sometimes it is what it is.
Well, thank you so much for all that you did with your agents and for your customers. And that was a question that came in too, was, how did you combat some of that negativity with your team? And it speaks volumes about the leadership from you and from Spartan Race. Couple minutes. That's all we have left. Can you believe it? I told you it was going to go fast. But for those of you listening, quick interruption. We love to hear your thoughts. There is a poll that just got dropped into the chat. It's in the poll tab. Please go ahead and respond to it. We'll give 10 random respondents a $5 Starbucks e-gift card. And who doesn't need a little caffeine lift me up every so often? All right, real quick. If I could get my words out, it would be quicker, right? Agent KPIs. How do you like? What is the most important KPI for your agents?
100% what we focus on is customer satisfaction. So everything else is secondary. So if they do 10 tickets or 100 tickets, I would rather see them do it with, 90% customer satisfaction rather than, a million tickets that day. It's all about the customer all the time.
And how do you measure that for messaging?
We're still working on that. For us, we use a tool called Stella to offer some star ratings and things like that, which we found really good. But, messaging is still new to us. So definitely if anyone has any brilliant ideas or new thoughts, I'd love to hear them. But, I think for us, it's still all about that customer satisfaction. How do we make sure that customer's interaction is solved, fully resolved, fully answered, and they're happy when they walk away from us?
Beautifully said. All right, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Spartan Race?
Next is getting out in the mud, Sarah. It's been 2.5 years since I've been to an event, and that is next for us. We're really focusing on putting on epic events this year and really incentivizing people to get out there and race with us. And it's even more awesome than when you left it a couple years ago. So, I think we're focusing now in so many areas, getting that event up and running and, updating our tech and really re-looking at, who our customer is now, different than they were 2 years ago. And how do we nurture that? So I think it's an ongoing learning experience for all of us.
Well, if you haven't done one of these races, I highly encourage it. I have done the Tough Mudder. I don't think I'm quite ready for the Spartan Race, but maybe I need to start doing one of those training programs that you talked about and get myself prepped for that. And with that, that is it for today. Thank you, Aja, for sharing your expertise. Thanks for talking about customer service and about mud. And thank you for everyone for sharing a moment with us. As I mentioned, give us some feedback. We love feedback. It is in the poll, and we'll choose 10 random respondents for a $5 Starbucks gift card. We love, love, love to get your feedback. And we have lots of amazing CX things coming up. Join us for Relate. It is our biggest flagship event, and it's happening on May 11th throughout most of the world, May 12th in APAC. Sign up. The link is in the chat, and we'd love to have you there. There are going to be some awesome customer stories. You'll hear what's new with Zendesk and about the evolution of CX. And because of Relate, we're going to take a CX moment break in May. So definitely sign up for Relate so that you don't miss us too much, because we'll miss you. And until then, thanks again, Aja. Thanks again, everyone. Be safe, be helpful, and we'll chat again soon. Bye, everybody.